The days after the hearing felt like stepping out of a storm and into sunlight. For months, I had lived under the constant gaze of a board that saw beauty as rebellion. Every time I trimmed a rose bush, I imagined Glenda Parks taking notes behind her blinds. But now, there was quiet, the kind that hums softly after thunder has passed. For the first time in nearly a year, I could breathe without waiting for another fine or warning to appear in my mailbox. The HOA office that once buzzed with rules, gossip, and judgment was now empty. Pending internal audit, the sign on the door read. The community board had officially been dissolved, and an interim committee, this time chosen by actual homeowners, not hand-picked loyalists, had taken over. They invited me to their very first meeting, not as a subject of discipline, but as a guest of honor. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I stepped into that same hall where Glenda once humiliated me, I felt the weight of the past hanging in the air. The walls still echoed with memories of those tense meetings, but now the atmosphere was entirely different. Gone were the stiff, rule-clutching board members and their cold, rehearsed smiles. Instead, the seats were filled with the very neighbors who had once looked away in silence. Their nods and warm greetings replaced the whispers that used to follow me. For the first time, Maple Ridge felt like a neighborhood, not a battleground. Mrs. Hanley, the new interim president, a retired teacher with gentle eyes and steady conviction, stood before the crowd. "We've all learned something," she began, her voice firm yet kind. "A community built on fear will always fall apart, but one built on respect will grow." The hall erupted in applause. It wasn't loud or chaotic, but heartfelt, a soft wave of collective relief and new beginnings. I sat there, smiling faintly, realizing that justice doesn't always come as punishment. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of peace. As for Glenda Parks, she disappeared from Maple Ridge like a shadow melting in daylight. Within weeks of the investigation, she resigned, sold her house, and vanished. Rumor had it the city's auditors discovered a long paper trail of embezzled funds. Thousands paid to a fake landscaping company tied to her brother-in-law, the same company she once required us to use. Her name, once synonymous with control, became a whisper of warning. Her downfall wasn't loud or publicized, it was private, hollow, and complete. And honestly, that was the most poetic part of all. A few weeks later, I opened a letter that made my hands tremble. Not from fear this time, but disbelief. Inside was a plaque from City Hall, engraved with my name, greater than asterisk, in recognition of the preservation of the Maple Ridge Heirloom Garden, a site celebrating resilience, heritage, and courage. I stared at it for minutes, running my fingers over the cold metal. The very garden Glenda had called an eyesore was now protected by the city as a historical landmark. Her fines, threats, and letters all rendered meaningless by a single bronze plate. It wasn't just my garden that changed, it was Maple Ridge itself. Word spread quickly, and people began to rediscover their love for individuality. Front yards that once mirrored each other now bloomed with wildflowers, fruit trees, and vegetable patches. The neighborhood transformed from uniform perfection to authentic beauty. Children played under the maple trees again. People waved instead of whispering. And for the first time in years, no one feared a clipboard or a citation taped to their door. Then one morning, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. The State Horticultural Society wanted to nominate my home for the Preservation Garden of the Year Hanalchase Award. Standing on that stage months later, in front of preservationists, homeowners, and even reporters, I told my story. Not about roses or fines, but about standing your ground when you're told you don't belong. Power, I said, isn't in control. It's in care. It's in choosing to protect what others dismiss. The applause that followed was deafening. But what moved me most wasn't the award. It was the quiet pride of knowing I'd turned humiliation into heritage. From that moment on, Maple Ridge became a different kind of community. The new bylaws ensured transparency and fairness. No more unchecked fines, no closed-door votes, no monopolies over contractors. The HOA's power no longer towered over the residents. It served them. People began to share seeds, stories, and laughter again. The uniform lawns that once symbolized control now bloomed with diversity, each yard reflecting its owner's heart. My garden, once labeled non-compliant, had inspired change across every street. Then one afternoon, as I was pruning roses under the soft glow of sunset, a familiar sound stopped me, the slow purr of an idling car. I looked up and froze. It was Glenda. Her black SUV sat at the corner, headlights dim. When she stepped out, she wasn't the same woman who once ruled this place with threats and letters. Her posture had softened, her eyes were tired. She approached the fence, voice trembling. "They're still beautiful," she said. I didn't respond, just kept trimming, the metallic snip echoing between us. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "I came to apologize." "I was wrong," she went on, voice cracking as she confessed. "I thought control meant perfection. But it only made everyone miserable. I lost everything. My house, my friends, myself. All because I couldn't accept that someone else's idea of beauty could be right." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I met her gaze. "Maybe now you understand what it feels like to be judged for what you love." Her eyes welled with tears. "I do." She turned, walked back to her SUV, and drove off without another word. I stood there, watching her disappear around the corner, and felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the hollow peace of silence, but the real kind. The kind that comes when the fight is over, and you've won by simply staying true. Months passed. The seasons shifted. My roses grew thicker and brighter, as if the soil itself was celebrating freedom. Neighbors began asking for cuttings, and I gave them away gladly. Soon, crimson heirloom roses began climbing fences all over Maple Ridge, on porches, near mailboxes, even around the old HOA office. They became more than flowers. They became a message, a declaration that beauty thrives when it's allowed to breathe. People started calling them freedom roses. And each time I saw one bloom down the street, I couldn't help but smile. A year later, poetic justice arrived, wrapped in irony. A real estate appraisal announced, "Greater than star Maple Ridge home values up 18%. Praised for character, diversity, and community spirit." The same HOA that claimed my roses lowered property values had unknowingly built its revival on them. When the new board unveiled a memorial plaque at the community park, I walked over quietly. It read, "Greater than asterisk, dedicated to those who protect the spirit of our neighborhood." Inspired by the heirloom garden. I couldn't help but laugh, softly, proudly. My once condemned garden had become the neighborhood's legacy. Now, each morning, I walk the path barefoot through the dew. The scent of roses drifts through the air. Bees hum softly, and I hear laughter from the children next door. Sometimes I pause at the bronze sign by my fence. Beauty doesn't need approval. And I whisper to myself, they fined me $5,000 for these flowers. Now they're worth $500,000, and every petal still blooms with defiance. Camera pans slowly over the glowing roses as gentle music fades in. The screen darkens, leaving only the plaque gleaming under sunlight.